The crowd of some 100,000, maybe a little more, making their way towards the exits after seeing Mika Häkkinen win his third Grand Prix of the season, his first here in Canada, in a race which we want to suggest was a little bit, as you say, demolition derby, but they're all factors. We knew that this race somehow always provides excitement.
It always does. I mean, I remember racing here for the first time in '78, and nothing has changed. But to see Michael Schumacher on the wall like that, Jacques Villeneuve, Damon Hill, Ricardo Zonta, and then Frentzen at the end. Frentzen had driven a copybook race, never put a wheel wrong, but something went wrong mechanically that threw him out of control. I mean, what a disappointment for Frentzen. But nonetheless, for Mika Häkkinen, drove superbly. He didn't have the legs of Michael Schumacher in the early laps, but he hung in there. And when Schumacher got it all wrong, that's when Mika Häkkinen was in position to pick up the lead. Those 10 points that now give him a 4-point advantage in the championship lead over Michael Schumacher. And going to Manicourt in France, that to me is a circuit that has to favour McLaren slightly more than Ferrari. Here in Canada, I think everybody felt it was pretty equal, and if it's equal then with the Schumacher factor, you've got to see Ferrari being marginally ahead. But you've got to stay on the track, you've got to avoid all the pitfalls, the walls, the grass, other traffic to finish. And there were 12 people that didn't finish, 10 did.
Remarkable Canadian Grand Prix. Mika Häkkinen, Giancarlo Fisichella and Eddie Irvine. Mika, the first ever race to finish under a safety car. Your previous best here, 5th. An excellent victory. How do you feel?
I feel incredible. It was excellent race, definitely, and I was very pleased about the way the race was going in early stages. Anyway, when Michael was leading, because I was comfortable with the car, and I was just able to go quicker if I wanted to, but there was no reason for it because the level of risk what could have happened, and then I saw Michael going off, and I don't know exactly what happened, but turned up to be very good for me. That's racing, and here I am, won the race, great feeling.
When you saw Michael in the wall, did you think about Imola?
I did actually. I did actually, and I remember saying that before the Barcelona, our car is extremely difficult to drive, and now it is better. It is definitely more consistent car. You can push the car more on the limit, and you can keep on the limit the car longer time. But obviously, it has turned other way around. It looks like these guys now have difficulties.
Mika, thank you. Giancarlo, you must love Canada. 3 years, 3 podiums, second again. A race-long battle with Heinz-Harald Frentzen. Tell us the story of your race.
Yes, this place for me is it's very lucky for me. I am so pleased about the result today. And my target was to score some points. And I am on the podium, I am the second position. That is great. The strategy was perfect. Just at the beginning of the race, with a lot of fuel, it was very difficult to drive a car because there was a lot on the steering. But then with half tank, was much better. When I lost my second position with, I think, Panis and Badoer, I don't know who was, I was very upset for that because they were 1 lap behind me, and for them I lost the position. But then Heinz-Harald spun off, and I gained the second position. It's a great position today.
Giancarlo, thank you. Eddie, you probably had the most eventful race of anybody. After a reasonably quiet start, after the first safety car, an incident with David, how did you see it?
Well, at the start of the race, I just looked after the brakes and tried to go as fast as I could without, really pushing the car too much. And then I started pushing, and of course, the safety car came out. And then, well, I forget, there was 2 cars in front of me, 2 back markers, and one of them went really badly through the dirt, through the chicane, and I got it on my tyres, and I just turned left coming onto the straight, and it just kept going straight towards the wall, and I had to just back off. Of course, that allowed DC to get a run. And then we were side by side through the first corner, but he went very, very wide. And then I just took the next one, and he just clipped my rear wheel and spun me. And then it got fun. It was after Barcelona. Jesus.
It got quite controversial, actually, because in the way you went past Herbert. How did you see that?
Well, he was a lot slower than me. You know, it's great we have a bit of controversy in Formula One, isn't it? Yeah, I was down the inside of him, and the two of us just break right on the limit, and I was on the dirt on the inside, and I could have tried to make the corner, but I might have lost it, so I thought it was better just to go straight. And I don't know what happened to Johnny, but he seemed to lose a lot of time as well, so I don't know whether he followed me through it or whether he made the corner or not. I don't know.
Eddie, thank you. Mika, we now move on to Magny-Cours with you in the lead of the World Championship, but it's another circuit where Ferrari have won for the last 2 years. What's the programme going forward?
Well, obviously we're going to do testing in end of next week, and concentrating on developing a car, and like we see our car is now stronger car now, it's more reliable car. So in the testing we are able to now to concentrate developing a car. We don't have to worry about if the car gonna break down all the time. That's the reality, and it's a strong car at the moment, and so we can go for testing now and develop the car consistently. That way we can make it faster, and I'm really looking forward, and we see what happens.
Congratulations, gentlemen. And now Mika and Giancarlo, a word in your own language, please.
Hieno homma.
And we welcome you back to Montreal. A very big point, of course, as the celebration continues in the McLaren garage. A win by, of course, Mika Häkkinen. David Coulthard, though, not able to come back, suffering a stop and go. But I think he makes a good point, Mika Häkkinen. John Watson, is when he says, you know what, the question about reliability, forget it now.
Well, McLaren have still a long way to go this season. They started off with a car that was blindingly fast but very unreliable. They seem to have gotten the reliability back. And Mick is talking about now doing the development to get the advantage back. But believe me, Ferrari and the rest of the field do not stand still. They're not going to let McLaren run away with the championship as they did last year. This is a championship that's going to go down to the wire. It's principally between Mika Häkkinen and Michael Schumacher, McLaren and Ferrari.
And when asked about the feeling, incredible. And why not, considering the way this place has treated him?
Well, it's just been a wonderful weekend. We've had the best weather I've ever seen in Canada. We've had a cracking race, literally. I mean, more cars off the track. I've never seen so many cars crash. So many top-name drivers find concrete, hit it in the wall. I mean, what went wrong?
Well, that's exactly it. Now, as a naive person to this, maybe, why? I don't expect Michael Schumacher to make that kind of mistake. And he may say it's dirty and dusty, but he is or has the reputation of being so mechanical, so much like a robot. Where did the robot go wrong?
Well, he just simply got it on the dust. He was pushing very hard. He was trying to gain fractions of seconds over Mika Häkkinen in second place. Just got a little bit loose, a little bit wide going into that final two turns, and the car was out of control. That shows you how simple and easy it is. We've seen lesser drivers get into trouble. Ricardo Zonta, Damon Hill, you can't call him a lesser driver. Jacques Villeneuve got it badly wrong. So it was very easy. If you made one little mistake, you were being punished as harshly as it was possible.
And of course, that big mistake by Michael Schumacher and the win by Mika Häkkinen has now changed the drivers' standings as they head back to Europe, as the 10 points for Häkkinen now has him in front by 4 over Schumacher. Eddie Irvine picking up 4 points for finishing third, is within 5 of his teammate. Giancarlo Fisichella picks up 6 points for his second consecutive second-place finish here in Canada, and is now tied with Heinz-Harald Frentzen, who crashed so close to the end, with Ralf Schumacher picking up 3 points. He's in 12th, so a tight battle there for 4th, 5th, and 6th. Coulthard remains now at 12 with Rubens Barrichello, Damon Hill, your top 9. As for Constructors' Championship, well, it is Ferrari who have given up a little bit of ground now to McLaren, who are within 9 points, and Jordan sitting a distant third. We'll return with more. Mika Häkkinen is your winner here in Montreal, the Air Canada Grand Prix. The race highlights brought to you by Castrol GTX. Drive hard. The 31st Canadian Grand Prix is won by Mika Häkkinen, with Giancarlo Fisichella, Eddie Irvine, as it ends behind the safety car. There were 12 retirements, and Jacques Villeneuve, of course, all the pressure on him coming home, did not finish as he was one of several, 3 former world champions who cracked that wall coming out of the final turn. And nice to welcome to our broadcast location the man we always hear and see, of course, throughout the season. Jerry Donaldson, your impressions on Jacques' performance and the race in general?
Well, Jacques' performance was one of the low points of the race for Canadian fans, but of the 31 Grand Prix held in our country, this, I think, is one of the most exciting. Who says Formula One is boring? Yeah. You guys must be hoarse having to describe all that action that took place in those 69 laps.
Well, exactly. And I mean, again, we've said before, this is a kind of circuit that lends itself to this. They don't test here. Maybe they are surprised by certain things when they come to Montreal.
Yes, I think it is the nature of the circuit that contributed to the type of race we had. As John forecast, lots of opportunities for overtaking. Some of them failed today, which only add to the entertainment. And I'm wondering about the Irish influence here, because I think the drive of the day was Eddie Irvine. He had his dander up.
Absolutely. Let's look back at the start of the race, which again, for the second straight year, was so eventful.
Well, look at Hackett on the left. Schumacher comes straight across in front of him. Eddie Irvine dives in behind, but all the action is going to take place towards the middle of the field, and it's Jarno Trulli who finds his way down the grass, takes out Barrichello, hits also Jean Alesi. Alesi is furious. Ruben Barrichello did recover, did get to start back in the race again, and Alexander Wurz, one of the others involved.
And of course, no red flag this time, no restart, but of course caught out. And I wondered from John earlier about this rush of blood to the head, trying to do too much too soon.
Well, we did see, and again, it's part of the entertainment value, some really bad driving today. Truly an example, and Olivier Panis refusing to look in his mirrors. And even as I think John said, 3 world champions crashed at the same place. Not bad driving, but mistakes by supposedly superior drivers. So we had action galore.
But by the same token, we wondered about what the stewards might do because of the fact that, you know, the drivers had said, look, some of the back markers have been failing. They handed out some penalties today.
Well, yes, there was a real flurry of stop-and-go penalties in the pit stops, where again there was more action. It was just non-stop. And so eventful and difficult to keep track of as a journalist. I know in the media center, the journalists were scratching their heads halfway through the race. Well, what comes next? And they'll be there very late tonight trying to sort it all out.
It is a kind of race, John, as we say, that lends itself to this. I don't think anyone expected those mistakes of those caliber drivers.
Well, first of all, I'm very surprised. I mean, Michael Schumacher, of all the people in the world, Grand Prix driver like he is, to make a mistake in the wall. Damon's had a rough year, and he's sort of maybe not driving at the level we're accustomed to seeing. Jacques was doing a very good job. He had started 16th. He'd found himself somewhat fortuitously up in 8th place and was moving forward. Just got caught out. I mean, these are world-class drivers you would not expect to see make mistakes. But I think just to reflect on what Jerry mentioned, that Luca Badoer and Olivier Panis were probably punished far too lightly for what they did to hold up that great battle between Fisichella and Heinz-Harald Frentzen, and particularly in the case of Panis, who was involved in a similar situation back in the San Marino Grand Prix where David Coulthard got held up. Olivier Panis should look in his mirrors, understand the rule book, and if he doesn't, well, there's other forms of racing he can take part in.
Go back to what you said earlier about the difference in era from yours when you made a career out of great overtaking moves. Lack of overtaking here. Does the lack of overtaking maybe force drivers to take these chances and maybe resent giving up position?
Well, I think every driver resents giving up any position. In my time, the cars were different. They weren't quite so technologically advanced. The aerodynamics certainly weren't. But we ran on slick tires. We had wider tires. We had different cars altogether. We had aerodynamics, I think, that were less crucial. We were able to pass. I know I could slide down in parts of the circuit that I have seen nobody attempt an overtake on here this weekend. That's the advances that technology have made. I have to say they're not all good advances, but that's what we've got in Formula One. We've got to learn to make them work. We've got to make the show a good show, because the public want to see motor racing, and they do want to see cars overtaking, because my definition of motor racing is overtaking.
And they did see a show today. Some of it not overtaking it, some of it crunching the wall. Mika Häkkinen celebrates his 3rd win of the season here at the Air Canada Grand Prix.
The 1999 Air Canada Grand Prix on TSN is brought to you in part by Castrol GTX, Drive Hard. By Molson Canadian, here's where we get Canadian. And by Suzuki, all you have to do is drive one. The 1999 Air Canada Grand Prix on TSN is brought to you in part by Bridgestone. Outsmart the road. Get the Rain Warriors from Bridgestone. By AT&T Canada, the network the world works on. And by Ford. For now, forever.
Standing here as we are, people might mistake us for the three on the podium, do you think?
Three Stooges, possibly.
Possibly. Welcome back, everyone. Yes, let's talk about some of those shunts and the people who were taken out. Three former world champions. Damon Hill, the first who went out cracking the wall coming out of the final turn, and then Michael Schumacher, who made a mistake that just isn't expected from someone of his caliber, John.
Not at all. Michael Schumacher comes down. He's got a car ahead of him. He's just overtaken. He turns in. There's a little bit of oversteer. Suddenly he loses control and just slams into that wall. I mean, really, once the oversteer set in, he was never, ever going to recover. And because the track is very dirty offline, it just accelerated. Look, frustration from Michael Schumacher. He sees 10 points in his championship quest have gone out in the wall.
And Jerry Donaldson very comfortably in the lead at that point. For him to make that mistake, not under pressure.
No, I'm sure he's hugely embarrassed. And I'll tell you, one man along on track at the same time who might heave a little sigh of relief was Mika Hakkinen. Remember, he did the same thing at Imola while in the lead, so they balance each other out today, but with Michael's accident.
But this is not a man, as we say, is expected to make those mistakes. Why press so hard, or is that just his nature?
Well, it certainly is nature, but it also adds to the human interest factor. Even the supposedly infallible superstar Schumacher does make mistakes. And that was the human interest factor, for me, was the story of the day here.
And of course, the media wanted to know, Michael, what happened?
Basically, what has happened is very easy. I went into the chicane slightly too fast, lost the car and hit the wall. Simply that. Circumstances have been difficult. As we see, they really are the same place, and the reason is that we have a lot of dust in that corner, and that means soon you lose a little bit the line. You have not much chance. Either you're slow enough just to make it, or you have normal race speed and you end up in the wall, and that's what happened to me. But obviously the other people can make it through there, so I should have made it. Are you disappointed, Mike?
And then, of course, there was one more meeting of that wall to come, and it was Jacques Villeneuve, who had already come face to face with it in '97, and again, just maybe a little too much. He blames the dirt too.
Yeah, Jacques Villeneuve, I mean, you can see him. This was a big, big hit, and I can guarantee you that Jacques Villeneuve is not going to be out clubbing in Montreal tonight, because when he stepped out of the car, he was already limping, and that injury will only get more and more discomfortable and painful. Look, 90 degrees here. I mean, that's horrendous, and that is actually tremendous testament to the strength of the current Formula One car.
And so from one pit garage, the media just ran down to the far end again to wonder what happened, but this time to Jacques Villeneuve.
Yeah, the car was a lot better in the race than in quali. I went off, I just went in a little bit too fast and lost control of the car on the dirt there. Apart from that, I was a little bit annoyed because Diniz overtook me under yellow flags when the safety car was out, and nothing happened to him.
That the straight line before the pit lane was a problem for the pilot this weekend.
Well, every car going through that chicane put a lot of dirt on the track, and it was easy to make a mistake.
Jerry, he certainly didn't have a car that put him among the leaders, but I think he probably would be satisfied where he was before the incident.
Yes, he'd come up a bit fortuitously, half distance really, from 16th to 8th place. But this is his fourth visit to this circuit for Jacques Villeneuve, the circuit named after his father. He's crashed out of the last three. I know that he said his '97 crash was the lowest point of his Formula One career after making a stupid mistake, he called it. And now he's done it again. Very embarrassing.
Yeah, but again, the same excuse, if we can call it that, as Michael said, you know, dusty, dirty. They just simply got offline, got into the marbles. But this track should not be dirty and dusty by this time of a weekend, should it?
Well, I think perhaps not, but again, there were so many cars spinning around and kicking up a dust. It's very dry here, and with the heat and the rubber laid down, it's bound to be marbles everywhere to skid on, and they did it.
It's been a disappointing weekend, then, to say the least, for this BAR team as they head back to Europe now in France.
Well, yes, it's almost half season once we get to France, and they still haven't finished in the points. They've had one race finish, so they very soon have to get some points on the board.
I would think. We'll take a quick break and then return with more from Montreal. Mika Hakkinen is the winner of the Air Canada Grand Prix on TSN. the Ferrari garages here at Circuit Gilles Villeneuve. One car, of course, goes home fully built. The other one will go home in pieces. I guess they will when they tear them down. They'll both go home in pieces. But certainly Michael Schumacher, after his cracking the wall. Do you think, considering what we've seen at that corner, that they may ask the race organizers to change that corner a little bit?
Vic, if they do, I'd be very surprised and rather disappointed, because the reason that these drivers went off on this particular corner is the drivers themselves. Now, they stayed on the racetrack and didn't try to cut across the corner using the curbs and using then the grass on the inside. It is using that much racetrack. They kick the dust, the dirt, the gravel onto the line, so they can only blame themselves for going off. Now, Michael Schumacher might say a car ahead of me did it. It's down to all the drivers to discipline themselves more.
Well, you look at what goes on here in the first lap and what is kicked up, and that kind of thing is carried onto a track, and it takes several laps before it is cleared. We have to pay tribute, though, to Eddie Irvine, who has had a wonderful run so far, and you know, he starts second row, had a wonderful run, got out of the trouble, and this run here, poor John Alesi.
Yeah, Alesi just gets T-boned by Trulli. There you can see the camera break-up indicates when the hit occurred. John Alesi was absolutely furious about this. He just felt that Jarno Trulli had no need to go down the inside. But of course, Trulli will say, no, it wasn't my fault. Somebody else's fault. Well, that's the usual excuse of a Grand Prix driver. There's an excuse book it's as big as the Guinness Book of Records, believe me.
I don't think Eddie Irvine thought he might score any championship points, but he finds himself on the podium with everyone going out, and him making a wonderful charge from the back of the field after he and Coulthard had gotten into it in turn one.
Yeah, this is a real battle for position coming down. You see, just as they exit onto pit straight, this is a battle for position.
Eddie Irvine making his way through the field. This is as he gets by. Pedro Diniz looking to the inside. This was the charge. This man literally worked his way through the field and showed that he has a more powerful car, but you can pass.
Oh, you can indeed, but even with a more powerful car, overtaking is not that easy, and we saw there with Pedro Diniz, Eddie Irvine took 2 or 3 laps to find a way past, but of course all that occurred because of the incident with David Coulthard a little bit earlier. The two of them went into turns 2 and 3 side by side, and you know, 2 into that won't go. You've got to go one by one. Irvine came out of it better than Coulthard and drove a great race to get onto the podium, and Ferrari will say, well, thanks, Eddie, for those 4 points, but their principal concern is poor Michael didn't score a point.
That's right, you bet they're going to say that. But listen, he had a great run. He found himself stuck, of course, behind Johnny Herbert and the Stewart, and he said in the post-race, as you heard, a little controversy is okay once in a while. Look at this, they used everything. Talk about dirt on the track.
But these two guys, they came down that fast straight. Johnny was not going to concede. They both braked later than they should do. But Irvine on the inside, the dirty line, he couldn't make the corner, so he had to go straight across, and that in turn forced Herbert to go straight across. Herbert's hand came out of the cockpit. Eddie, that's not fair. I don't like you anymore. Well, he lost the position, and in spite of arm waving, that's motor racing. Irvine got the podium, and Johnny got his 1 point.
And how good is that to be able to hold the car right there with its tires and the grooves full of dirt?
Eddie had to use all his skill, all his guile to keep that car under control. You can see he gives a throttle and almighty stab. The car sleeps sideways. It could have leapt the other way. It could have gone right into that barrier. But today, everything is with Eddie. Here's the maneuver. This is how it all took place. Irvine, Herbert, over the grass, go rally crossing. Irvine gets third.
And then with the crash, of course, of Heinz-Harald Frentzen with 4 laps remaining, it gave Eddie Irvine third place on the podium. This is a gentleman who's been talked about a lot lately. Where will he go? Will he stay with Ferrari? After drives like that, if you're Ferrari, don't you want terrific talent? Don't you want him, regardless of what might be the battles between him, reportedly, him and Michael Schumacher?
Well, I think Michael Schumacher recognizes an Eddie Irvine, and in fact acknowledged it here this weekend. The good work that Eddie Irvine did all last week, testing in Italy and Fiorano. While Michael was over here with his family having a lovely time going to some of the holiday resorts. It's nice when you're a world champion, when you're paid zillions of dollars a year, you can take time off to be with your family. Poor Eddie, get in the car, son, do the laps, don't argue about it. Oh, by the way, if Michael's behind you, you've got to let him pass you. And in fact, if Michael's ahead of you, slow down to make sure the McLaren guys don't get close. He does get paid very well to do that, but the guy's got self-esteem. He wants to win races. He wants to win races the right way. He wants to get on the podium the right way. But Ferrari say, those are the terms of the contract. If you want to drive for us, you drive under those terms. And I suspect he'll be there next year as well.
Excuse me, he did. He tested last week until he said he was dizzy. But of course, that option still has to be exercised by Ferrari later this season, or we could find Irvine moving somewhere else. And Jordan, of course, is the hot rumor. We'll take a quick break and then return with more from Montreal as the Hackanens will celebrate an anniversary, their first Air Canada Grand Prix win. Well, there will always be Jacques Villeneuve fans in Montreal and, of course, across Canada. And yes, he does have to hang in there. A disappointing end again for Jacques Villeneuve. And in fact, the whole BAR team. Disappointing as well for Heinz-Harald Frentzen, the Jordan driver who had been impressive so much this season in the first 5 races. Had a wonderful battle going with Giancarlo Fisichella and then took advantage of a back marker.
Yeah, this is very smart of Heinz-Harald Frentzen. All the messing around with Panis and Luca Badoer. Fisichella overruns the 2 cars, loses momentum. Frentzen sees it, slots his car between Fisichella and Panis, and then gains the position. Of course, he's then got to find a way past Panis, who's pretty difficult to make a way past.
He eventually did, and he seemed to be holding off comfortably. Fisichella, maybe 1.5 second lead until what we assume from Eric Silberman's report, brake failure caught him with 4 laps to go.
Yeah, this is a very big accident. Frentzen just probably lost one of the rear brakes. It could have been a disc, maybe collapsed or something in the pads. But a disappointment, a great drive for the most improved Grand Prix driver in Formula One this year, Heinz-Harald Frentzen.
And of course, we saw him taken away, helped a little bit, limping, and I'm not sure, we haven't heard any reports of a possible injury, but certainly he has to be hurt mentally. I mean, he had it there, he had the 2nd place.
Yeah, but he's grown so much this year. 97, 98 at Williams, basically a disaster, although he won his first Grand Prix in the San Marino Grand Prix that year. But coming to Jordan, it's like a new man. He's breathing fresh air. He's suddenly a racing driver again. He's driving, I mean, sublimely. We had onboard shots of Frentzen. I haven't seen him drive in that way probably since his days at Sauber. In fact, going back before that, when he was a member of the Mercedes-Benz Junior Sports Car team. He's a new racing driver, and he will, I believe, at some point this year, win a Grand Prix for Jordan. And that's a bold prediction. But who would have predicted Damon Hill and Ralf Schumacher 1st and 2nd in Belgium last year?
Exactly. It has been a wonderful weekend here in Montreal. Glorious weather all 3 days. We'll take a quick break and then wrap up the Air Canada Grand Prix on TSN. It's open 7 days a week, the Montreal Casino. But there was some gambling on the Circuit Gilles Villeneuve as we welcome you back to Montreal. Mika Häkkinen, the winner. You've seen every one of these Grand Prix since the first in '67, Jerry Donaldson at Mosport, Ontario. How will you remember this one?
Well, I started off following this sport as a fan, Vic, and always stayed a fan, and this today confirmed it more than ever. This is a wonderful day for Formula One fans. A privilege for us to be able to carry this race. One of the most exciting, I think, in the history of the Canadian Grand Prix.
John Watson, as we look ahead now to France and Europe, and as Jerry suggests, halfway point. What have we seen to this point as we go overseas again?
Well, Vic, we've seen basically what we've always seen, that's domination, not from 4 teams, but now 2 teams, McLaren and Ferrari. But in fact, there's a battle going on behind those teams with Jordan, Benetton and Williams, and that's a battle for the 3rd team. It used to be the top 4, it's now the top 2. One of those 3 teams want to make it a top 3. Jordan are the team that are probably the most consistent currently, but Benetton have come back in very strongly indeed. And Williams, if they could just get Alex Zanardi up to speed and get him into the points to really help Ralf Schumacher. You know, some of these teams are flying on one engine, and that's the case very much of Williams at this time.
Exactly. Everyone waiting for maybe engine updates and possibly, of course, new engines by the time next season rolls around. Jerry Donaldson, we thank you very much as always. Speak to you in France. Eric Silberman in pit lane. John Watson, thank you, sir. It has been indeed a pleasure. And to our entire crew, a thank you. And as we leave you, we'll leave you with some pictures of this week here in Montreal. The first Air Canada Grand Prix on TSN. You've been watching TSN, Canada's most watched sports network.